So She Did podcast. This is Kristin Esparza, and thank you so much for listening today. Today's episode is going to be very exciting. It's unique. It's something a little bit different than what we've been talking about, but it's actually the episode that I've had the most questions about going into this season, because it's something very unique that we don't talk about as commonly in society, but I think it's something that's becoming much more common. We are talking, as we go into this episode, what we want to talk about is what hypnosis is, how it has become, a psychological tool that people can use to improve their well-beings, to improve their lives. And I wanted to have somebody, again, who's an expert at hypnosis talk to us about it. He's worked with many clients before. He's been on other shows. And my first conversation with him was really exciting because he's open, he's candid, and I could tell that he's very knowledgeable, not only about this, but about a lot of alternative psychological therapies. So without further ado, let's jump into this, Robert. Tell me, what exactly is hypnosis? Because my first introduction to hypnosis was probably as a little kid watching a cartoon where, somebody tried to hypnotize Tom and Jerry or something like that. You see the black and white circles. Yes, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see he's swinging a pendulum in front of us. So,
oh, that was even better. That was a pocket watch.
A pocket watch. So tell me, what is hypnosis?
Oh, that is the $1,000,000 question. It's a lot of things, but first and foremost, it is a natural process. It's a natural function of your mind. I always like to get out there very early as a bit of a surprise. You are in hypnosis twice a day, at least. Some people much more. And the times that happens is 30 minutes before you go to bed and 30 minutes after you wake up. So, for example, when you first come into consciousness in the morning and you have that, hopefully those couple moments that you get to lay there and just kind of drift, and your thoughts drift and you're very relaxed. And maybe sometimes you've had a coming together moment, like everything just kind of clicked. It's not a problem you've been working on or something like that. That's trance. Mm-hmm. That is the trance state. And hypnosis, or hypnotherapy, we'll say, or both, is basically utilizing that process, which is directly communicating with the subconscious mind by removal of the critical filter between your conscious and subconscious mind.
Okay.
Which is normally what catches the information that you get throughout the day and determines whether it's rejected or accepted into your life script. And this is gone about by traditionally the same means, which is a type of overload. If that sounds broad, it's because it is. That can mean a lot of things. Technically, it is an overload of message units, we call them. And a message unit is anything: sight, sound, smell, taste, a sensory input into your brain, into your perception. Mm-hmm. And when you've reached a critical level of that, your body will go into its sympathetic nervous response.
Okay.
Be overloaded, go into fight, flight. From that, your parasympathetic will kick in. If you can neither fight nor flee, your body gives you this kind of cool down period. And in that cool down period, which is the parasympathetic response, you are hypersuggestible.
Okay.
Your subconscious will take in things.
In layman's terms, for those of us who have never heard these words before, what's the difference between, no, that's okay. That's okay. That's why I'm here to help break it down. What is the difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system?
So the sympathetic nervous system is your what we call your primitive mind.
Your primitive mind, okay.
It's your core reflexes. What your when presented with an overload, your brain will go to that core system, and it's, do we fight it or can we run from it?
Okay.
And whenever neither of those things is possible, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, which is as keyed up as the sympathetic nervous system is. Are you going to have to run for your life or fight for your life?
Hmm.
It's kind of like a relaxing response. Your mind slows down a little bit. It's like your brain patting you on the head and telling you everything's going to be okay.
Okay, and telling you to think about it.
Exactly.
So if we go to
Exactly.
that primitive mindset, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. I started with the Tom and Jerry example. So if you are the mouse and you're running from the cat, as soon as you see the cat, your brain goes into that primal brain mode, which says, I've got to run. I can't fight this guy. He's too big for me. I've got to run. But the parasympathetic is what comes in and tells the little mouse, hey, you've got some other resources. You might be able to trick him. You might be able to trip him. You might be able to
Mhm.
slow down. Hold on. There's other things that you can do here. So it's kind of a more evolved part of the brain that brings us
Yes.
greater awareness. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Absolutely. Very
fantastic.
good. That's one of the more concise ways I have heard it summarized. So awesome.
Okay. All right. So, where did hypnosis originate? Where did this start?
Well, that's in popular culture. I can give you the definitive answer to that as to when it became to our awareness.
Okay.
As to how long trance state has existed, possibly forever. It could
Okay.
be an ingrained part of us. There's also the school of thought that says it is recently evolved in this thing that is called metaprogramming, which is the
Yes.
conscious alteration of thoughts and behaviors, is an evolutionary step.
Mhm.
But to kind of give the brief history of hypnosis, it started in the mid 1700s with a man named Franz Mesmer.
Mhm.
And if you haven't heard the name, you've heard the word mesmerize, which is
Yes.
where it comes from. Well, Franz Mesmer was kind of a con man, but it really brings into some ethical questions
Mhm.
because his thing was he was purporting this process called animal magnetism. Basically, this man thought he had superpowers
Okay.
and that he was able, through his own animalistic charisma, to affect change on people and did it.
Mhm.
In retrospect, we see he was using hypnosis.
Yeah.
So Mesmer's kind of a double edged sword historically to me because is somebody a con man if they're seeing results and they just don't know exactly what it is they're doing? Because he wasn't grifting people, he wasn't selling snake oil. He just didn't know what he was doing, but he was still
Mhm.
helping people.
He was helping people. So,
Yeah.
I think a lot of the reasons that people are afraid, who haven't done hypnosis before, of being hypnotized is because they think they're going to lose control. So if we talk about being mesmerized, again, you see that image of, somebody's eyes turning into this little vortex and they don't know what's going on. Does that really happen in hypnosis?
No, that's a very common question. And the easiest response I can give is it's the exact opposite.
Mhm.
People think that hypnosis is mind control, and it is the opposite. It is getting control over your own mind,
Oh, I
becoming
love that. I love that.
becoming aware of these subconscious processes in the way that your mind processes and interprets information. It gives you more control. And
Mhm.
it has to be said that I cannot, in hypnosis, make anyone do something they would be morally opposed to.
Okay.
If if in hypnosis I tell you to pick up a gun and shoot someone, you're not going to do it because your subconscious at its core knows that doesn't jive. It's hypnosis isn't a jerking process. It's a gradual easing towards.
Mhm.
Like it's not just a snapping your fingers and all of a sudden you think a completely different way. Um, I said hypnosis is a natural process, and it is. So the question has to be asked, what is my job as a hypnotherapist?
Yes.
And my job as a hypnotherapist is to know the language of your subconscious, to
Okay.
know how to guide it to that direction of change in thought or behavior that you're aiming for.
Mhm.
And it is different because the subconscious doesn't work on things like willpower and reason and things like that, like the conscious mind does, like the conscious world does. It works on metaphor and association and what it is familiar and unfamiliar with.
That's why our
Because,
dreams are less concrete.
yes, our dreams are also more compartmentalized
Mhm.
than we think. One of the things that I learned was we have three different sections of dreams. Uh, the first section, when you first go to sleep, that's just the best way to put it is housekeeping. Your
Okay.
brain's just playing around with the blocks that's got laying around. The middle section of your dreams is something called the predictive state, which is your brain is taking information that it knows and kind of trying to predict results of what will happen. The last section of dreaming, which is where, because I do dream therapy, it's
Okay.
part of what I do, um, is what I'm interested in.
We might
Those
talk
are
after this because I have some crazy dreams. So,
awesome. Well, if they happen right before you wake up, like if they're
yes.
the dreams you have before you wake, they're significant
Okay. Good to know.
because the that section of dreaming, that is when your subconscious is trying to work through problems.
Good to
That
know. Okay.
that's and a lot of people have talk about dream therapy and dream interpretation, and I've heard a lot of very bad versions of it
Mhm.
because there's this assumption that the language of dreams is a universal thing, and it
Mhm.
is 100% not. It
Yeah.
is totally subjective. So, if in a dream dictionary somebody it says like, I don't know, a snake is a bad omen. What about it if like that's a snake handler, like works at a zoo or something,
Yeah. Where
and
it's
and it
showing
has like,
control and taking
yeah.
back or something, you know?
So what I do um, with dream therapy is sometimes there's a period of me helping somebody through a program to help remember their dreams to
Mhm.
begin with, which is something I can do. Um, and then I have them, whenever they have this venting dream, whenever it's right before you wake, I have them write it down. And
Mhm.
I go through and I examine all of the details and what I know about them and what this subconscious metaphor, which is what a vending dream is a complex metaphor, is saying for their problems.
Yeah.
And it's very, very useful. I can actually, in subconscious, give the suggestion to have a venting dream so it becomes more clear what is causing these things in your life.
Would that be considered lucid dreaming if you are
Mhm.
trying to intentionally have a dream about something?
Kind of, because you're not lucid dreaming is interaction, conscious interaction in your dreams.
Okay.
But just wanting to vent things out, I don't know if I would so much consider it lucid dreaming. It could be a lucid dream, but at the same time, it could not be. So it's just the subconscious suggestion to do it.
Okay.
And the power of subconscious suggestion is significant. It is with us every single day. Association is the reason for everything.
Well, I want to circle back to two things that you talked about early on.
Okay.
When I first asked you what hypnosis was, you said it's removing the filter
Mhm.
basically between the subconscious and the conscious. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct.
So I like that. So when you remove the filter between those two things, you're better in tune with yourself and with your own either desires, wants, those kinds of things, or the things that are holding you back, the things that are subconsciously
Well,
stopping you from moving forward in your life. So,
think about that moment during waking, the way your brain works and the way you think. That's
right.
one of the times in life your filter is down, and there is that feeling of integration. There is that feeling of relaxation and peace.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, I talked to you about this. I tried one time to do astral projection. For those of you
Mhm.
who are not into this kind of thing and haven't heard of it before, astral projection is the idea that you actually project yourself to somewhere else. And I read about this in a book and I thought, that sounds kind of cool. I'll try it. So I was listening to this audio that's supposed to guide you doing astral projection before I fell asleep one night. It didn't work for me. Nothing happened. The next morning, I woke up earlier than I normally do. And I was in between this half awake, half asleep phase, grabbed my phone, started listening to it, and I was blown away by the results, because, you know, I had tried the night before, and then in the morning when I was really kind of groggy and not awake, not asleep, then it worked because I wasn't trying. So I would assume with your clients, when they come in for hypnosis and they're talking to you, how do you get them to that phase where they're relaxed and they're comfortable and they're open to that? Because I can imagine you have to be kind of open to it. Or am I wrong?
I mean, so long as you follow along with my words and
Mm-hmm.
follow my voice, hypnosis is inevitable. Um, and it's I do have clients that come in high strung
Mm-hmm.
because of the issues that we're working with. And it's only ever a process the first time, because after the first time, you know what the state is, and you know how relaxing it is, and you know the work that's being done, because the results of hypnotherapy are rapid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not to say that it'll fix your problem in one shot, but it's not to say that I haven't. Um, I have taken away fears in a single session. I have made
Wow.
somebody stop smoking in a single session.
Wow.
That is no guarantee, and I need to make this clear for,
Of course.
for any results. um, but it is very quick, because, and I don't just speak of this as a hypnotherapist. I speak of this as somebody who undergoes hypnotherapy,
Do you?
because yes, absolutely. I have a close friend and peer that we work together. And that's just kind of because every hypnotherapist needs to go through that. It's a very important thing. And there are there's two schools of thought. One, doing hypnosis. There is the school of thought that says you need to keep yourself out of hypnosis the entire time, make a conscious effort to stay out, and between clients, make sure you're present. I follow the other school,
Okay.
um, which says you go into hypnosis with your clients, because
Okay. Mhm.
the best way to speak to the subconscious mind is with the subconscious mind, because I don't really use scripts.
Mhm.
There's some things I do for like weight loss sometimes and things like that, where it's good to have the structure.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I am I'm there with my client so I can better understand their reactions. I'm focused on their face, their breathing, all of these things, and everything that you do, every way that you breathe or twitch mandates the next things that come out of my mouth. And it's a fascinating process when done that way,
So it
because
sounds like
it's
you have to kind of be in tune with their energy, if you will,
yes,
in order to
I
be effective,
I say it feels like a dance,
like a
because it
dance.
kind of does. And it's difficult to describe, but that's the best way I can think to put it, because as they relax, I go forward. As they resist, I pull back. But in my pulling back, I know how to also get them back to where they need to be. So it's a very flowing state.
Interesting.
Um, yeah.
And that's
People
why
ask
when
like,
I
how do I
first
not fall
talked to you,
asleep?
yeah, you want to fall asleep. You're not really asleep, you're in a trance, right?
Yeah, but you want to
Yeah.
fall asleep. You could. If I just walked up and left the room while someone is in trance, you'll fall asleep in like 5 minutes.
Okay, so I talked to you when you and I first talked about the fact that I have done some self hypnosis. I've listened to some YouTube videos. I've bought some books on it, and you were like, no, 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 no. I appreciate that you've tried that. I appreciate that you've done that, but you're missing the full effect of working with a hypnotherapist. So tell me what's the difference. And I love that you just said you didn't say that you self hypnotize yourself. You said, I get hypnotized. I have somebody that I work with. So you were talking about somebody else who's your partner, even for you being a certified master hypnotherapist. You work with
Well,
a
and
person. So what's the benefit?
I do self hypnotize as well, because
Mhm.
self hypnosis is absolutely a thing. But for self-hypnosis to truly be effective, it needs to be taught, programmed, because when I learned how to self-hypnotize, it wasn't a matter of listening to a recording or something like that. I was taken through the process. I was given post-hypnotic suggestions to return to that state
Mhm.
because it's easier that way. Because if I can take you down where you want to be to show you this is what this feels like, this is how it felt to get there, and here are words and phrases and colors or whatever have you can use as an anchor to help you return to this state at your will. And it is useful. I use self hypnosis almost every day.
Mhm.
There is a distinct difference between self hypnosis and hetero hypnosis, which is someone else.
Mhm.
It's basically the difference between cutting your own hair and having someone else do it.
Well,
It
I'm not letting anybody else. I'm not going to cut
well,
my hair myself. I tried that once.
well,
I'm still
there's some people
recovering.
that are really good at it, but even then, the outside perspective is helpful. I mean, I recognize this is an absolute garbage metaphor considering like where I'm at. I haven't seen a barber in like, I'm not going to think about that anymore. Anyway.
No, but I think that is a good metaphor. It helps me understand. It's a difference
Yeah.
between, I mean, I just, I moved from Texas to Colorado, and it took me almost a year to find somebody I trusted with my hair. So
Yeah.
it's a good metaphor.
But you were still probably snipping at split ends and maintaining yourself, which is
I mean, I really wasn't. It was a bad place to
in
be.
theory you could have been.
In theory,
But
I could have been. Let's
that's
just
kind of
say
what
for a little
self-hypnosis
brief
is.
period of time, I was grateful for the quarantine, so I didn't have to go out and nobody had to see my hair.
None of us were.
But so tell me then, because a lot of what you're describing sounds kind of like meditation to me. How is it different than meditating?
Not.
It's
It's
not. Okay.
it's all
That's not the answer I expected.
yeah. It's all entering into that theta state.
Okay.
And it's the the metaphor I use to give the difference between hypnosis and meditation is meditation is swimming around the pool.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, hypnosis is taking a dive into the deep end and then getting out.
Ah, okay.
So you're going to go generally much deeper. Here's an interesting thing that I actually, full confession, just learned. You know who Edgar Casey is, right?
I don't. Tell me.
Oh, God, that's a rabbit hole. Oh no. Um, Edgar Casey was often referred to as history's only real psychic. He
Okay.
would make predictive visions to the point that he had at one point a whole hospital with a full medical staff working for him uh, in the 30s based upon these things. The way he got to this state that he was able to access the things that he was with a hypnotist.
Interesting.
That's so I you can spend many, many years learning how to do transcendental meditation,
Mm-hmm.
or you can come hang out with me for an hour, maybe a session or two, and I can take you to that exact same state by guiding you there. Because that's really what it is. It's the guide. It's the somebody else knows how to get there. And it's always easier to have somebody get you there than to try to find it yourself.
Right. And I think there's some comfort in that too. And you mentioned the fact that he was considered a psychic. In my mind, a psychic, back to what you said, you remove that filter between the subconscious and the conscious. I think that with psychics, very often we have this idea that they're predicting the future or they're doing these things when really they've just kind of removed that filter and their brain is processing all of the input differently. So you mentioned he had a hospital, for example. If he can predict an illness coming, something like that,
Mhm.
it's because that conscious part of his brain that sees the tangible actions that are happening that could lead to illness is not filtered from the subconscious, which says, hold on a second here, I can see where this will lead. And I think that that's powerful for all of us in our own lives when we remove that filter, and then we can combine what we actually know and see and experience with that subconscious. And we know, I've read so many things, and we know this intuitively. You meet people and you know almost instantly whether you like them or not, whether you're going to get along with them or not. And that comes from those previous tangible experiences that you've had with people. And so sometimes you meet somebody, you know what, I don't like this person because they remind me of so and so. But that is that filter removing between your subconscious and your conscious. And so I think that when you work with a hypnotherapist like yourself and you remove that filter, you start to become more aware of things, because there's a blending then of the way that your brain processes information.
Well, the filter comes back. It's not a permanent removal of the filter, though there are people that exist that basically don't have that filter.
Interesting.
And that's the reason stage hypnosis exists. But that's something I'll get into in a moment. But there's an awareness that comes with undergoing hypnosis and becoming familiar with that part of your mind. There is something that, and I'm sure I'm going to end up writing a book on this, but there's a concept that I'm starting to kind of grow, which is, we know about mental health, we know about physical health, and we know about emotional health. But there is another aspect that has previously been ignored that I can't really quite place a name for. I don't know if you could call it psychosomatic health, you could call it psychic health, you could call it all manner of things. But it's this concept of keeping your mindset healthy, of being careful what you let in, being careful of not being suggestible to things around you, and filtering out the things that will give you unhealthy suggestions.
Right.
And just learning about that this process even exists is really what it boils down to, because it's like we have an aspect of ourselves we ignore. Or not ignore, just we've not really fully learned about it yet. And there's progress being made in that, because the things that I work with are a very weighty subject, because it's consciousness.
Yeah.
And you ask what hypnosis is, and the short, easy answer is, I don't know.
Okay.
Because to answer that question, we would have to be able to first say, what is consciousness?
Yes.
What even is this thing that I'm working with? We know there are predictable, repeatable things that can be done. There are definitive things we know about it, but we actually don't know what this thing is.
Yeah.
Like, we cannot replicate it. We cannot measure it. Like, it's this incredibly, not, I want to say indefinable, but we will one day define it. There is research very intensively going on right now to define consciousness. I saved this article because it was such an inspiration to me, that it was from, I believe, Scientific American, and it was talking about this filter that seems to exist in our mind that keeps things from entering into our long-term storage, and was this big long scientific article that was, without even talking about hypnotherapy or hypnosis, was describing the subconscious, conscious, and critical minds, and without any interaction between my field and theirs, we're describing what we work with and everything I've said. So
I think so. Early on, you mentioned metacognition. I did years ago, I taught high school, and that was actually one of the vocabulary words that we had to teach the kids. And one of the things that I told them to do was, I want you to think about sitting under an apple tree right now. Picture yourself under the tree, picture the leaves, you feel the wind. You've got this image of yourself there. But then there's a part of you up here that is aware that you are thinking about being under the apple tree. That's removed from the actual thought and the image of being in the apple tree. It's that extra higher place in your brain. And I think that's what consciousness is. And to your point, you said that, we can't just define it yet. I think that we all know that it's there and we have a definition of it.
Yeah.
We just don't have the language to describe what it is yet. Scientifically, we're working, I think, on defining what consciousness is, but being able to describe it is interesting, and it's challenging, even though we all have that same shared experience.
It exists. We know it exists.
It's a tangible thing.
Yeah.
And
But
so
you can't show someone else that it exists, even though they themselves have it. Like, we can't. It's the strangest problem. And what's interesting is when you said that cognitive exercise you worked through with your students, that's a hypnotic induction.
Yeah. Is
like
it hypnotize a bunch of 10th graders without knowing it?
Yeah, probably. At least some of them. The more suggestible among them would absolutely go into hypnosis for that.
Interesting.
That is very similar to a hypnotic induction that I would use, because a lot of the inductions I use are a visualization process.
I see.
And easing down into that. And it's part of the reason that I'm able to work fully remote. This physical office is a home office. I've got a couple of clients that I see like home visit, but it's remote because the physical contact is not needed. Technically, the one-on-one being able to see you is not needed. If I've worked with somebody a few times before, I can work with a phone call.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier stage hypnosis. Let's talk about that, because we've all, seen videos of it, or we've been to Vegas and we've seen these big stage hypnosis shows. Is that real? Is it fake? What's happening?
It's real.
It's real, really? Okay.
Yeah. Most of the time.
Okay.
If you see a bunch of people clucking like a chicken on the Maury Povich show, that's either paid actors or mass hysteria.
Okay.
So to explain stage hypnosis, I kind of have to explain suggestibility.
Okay.
So from the literal and metaphorical school that I come from of hypnosis, it utilizes this scale that we measure everyone on. It's called the E&P scale of suggestibility, E for emotional, P for physical. And that mandates basically on the surface the language that I must use to induce trance in that person. If they're physical, they need to be spoken to literally and be given direct suggestions. Okay. So absolutes, your eyes are getting heavy, you are feeling drowsy, and you can give them commands. The higher physicals hate metaphor. They want to be told directly what to do. They don't want a story. They don't want to dance around it. They want to be told. On the other end of that, you have the emotionals. An emotional, you must use inferred and indirect language with. You may begin to feel your eyes getting heavy. If you do, simply let yourself go with that feeling.
I see.
Submissive language. And in between those two, you have something called a somnambulist, which is somebody that works in the 50-50 range. Somnambulists are usually, it translates to sleepwalker, and it's very accurate as to what they are.
Okay.
And they are the people most hypnotically suggestible in the population. It is between 5 to 10% of the population, and they practically live in trance, if not in trance, right there at the razor's edge. And it is very easy to pick these people out of an audience, which is where the talent of a stage hypnotist comes in. That's the one and only real talent they have.
How do they pick them? How can you tell just by looking at somebody?
Well, you run a test, and there's a couple of ways to do a test. One of my favorite ways is you go up on stage and you hold up your hand and you say, I would like everyone to focus on my hand. And I would like you to picture in my hand a yellow, ripe lemon shiny yellow skin, smooth as can be. And I'd like you to also picture a knife in my hand. And as I cut the lemon, I would like you to imagine the sour, bitter juices running down my wrist and over the knife. Look out in the audience and see whose lips are puckering or who's licking their lips. And those are your somnambulists.
Interesting. Okay. So they're more easily suggestible. So we do that for entertainment, but let's get to the real reason that people come to you for help. So what are some of the common reasons that you see people seeking hypnosis?
Well, I see people for such a wide variety of things. But if I could be considered to have a specialty, it would be fear and trauma.
Fear and trauma. Okay. I thought you were going to say, weight loss and smoking cessation, because
No.
that's what we hear about. So talk to me about hypnosis.
I do that as well.
Talk to me about hypnosis in terms of fear and trauma. What does that look like?
Well, first of all, those are pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
I believe, because you aren't afraid of something unless you've been traumatized by it. And you aren't traumatized by something that you did not express a lot of fear of. And I also have to note there's a difference between a fear and a phobia.
Okay.
A fear has a reason, an event that caused this fear.
I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. Yes. I'm afraid of jumping out of a plane because I could die.
Well, that would be more of a phobia. An actual fear would be, I got bit by a dog when I was a kid, and now I'm afraid of dogs.
Okay.
A phobia would be,
I'm afraid of roaches, just so you know. That is a phobia of mine. If I walk into
I had arachnophobia.
Yeah.
It was fixed with hypnotherapy.
Okay.
So with fear and trauma, you are always in whatever state and age you were when that happened. So if you are afraid of dogs because you got bit by a dog when you were 7, then you always remember that event as a 7-year-old with all of the emotional intelligence and comprehension of a 7-year-old.
Interesting.
Even though you could be 37, you still in your mind process that information as that child.
Interesting. I hate to interrupt. One of the things that I read recently that I thought was really compelling is that people who were abused as children and grow up to abuse, very often it's because when that abuse happened, they almost stopped developing. They stop developing. And so they get stuck in this stage of their life where this happened. And then when they become adults, they repeat that behavior because they're stuck there. They're stuck in that traumatic event and they keep reliving it. And unfortunately, it creates victims in other people because they're unable to move on from that stage in their life.
I see very similar things happen with combat PTSD.
Yeah, interesting.
So let's say if somebody joined the military when they were 18, shipped off to war, saw terrible things, and got out when they were 30. Mm-hmm. When they get out, I've noticed this in some people I work with, they get out and as a defensive mechanism, they go back to almost like a computer, going back to the last safe save point, which is 17 years old.
Yeah.
So you have these grown combat veterans out there skateboarding, smoking pot behind the bowling alley, like going back to the behaviors they did when they were 17, because in their minds, that is the last time it was safe to be alive.
Interesting. And I know this is going to be controversial for me to say, and that some people may not agree with me. This is kind of a psychological theory that I read recently, but you hear about a lot of the pedophilia scandals in the Catholic Church. And I have read that from a psychological standpoint, not the right and wrong, we can all agree it's wrong, that what happened is a lot of young boys, go into seminary, they're abused, and their development stops then when they're 17 years old. And then their sexual orientation and their sexual training and their sexual development starts right there and it stays there. So then when they stay in the seminary or they stay in the priesthood,
They
they
become a
then
priest, and
they become a
yeah,
priest and they repeat that behavior because as a 15, 16, 17-year-old boy, that's what they learned and they became stuck on it and never, developed beyond that. And so again, I know a lot of people will disagree with it, but I think that it's something to be examined. And I think that it's
it's
something,
something that absolutely should be examined.
right?
And
What is the
all of these
psychological
things,
impact of that? Yeah.
all of these things that we speak about kind of have the same thing, be
Mm-hmm.
it trauma, abuse, uh, witnessing horrors and being traumatized by that. It's all your memory.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talk about at length with my trauma clients is the malleability of memory.
Mm-hmm.
That memory is such an unreliable thing that the worst form of legal evidence on earth is witness testimony,
Yeah.
because you can have nine different people witness the exact same event and hear nine different things. And not only is memory flawed, but it can be molded for better or for worse,
Yeah.
which means that if you compound your own trauma by just continuing to darken this memory, it will change and grow and develop to be worse.
Right.
And
And that's why you hear about siblings who grew up with the exact same parents, the exact same life, and they tell the story two very different ways. There's a
yes,
book out there called Educated, that was written by a girl, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, who experienced abuse as a child in fundamental Mormonism. And this was a bestseller. I think it probably still is on the bestseller list. But throughout the book, she disclaims, she says, my brother, to have a little asterisk, my brother remembers the story very differently than I do. And I think that has to do with what you said. Everybody's memory is shaped by their own experience, their own emotions at the time, their own environmental influences and experiences up to that point. And to your point, witnesses of crimes and things like that see things and remember things very, very differently.
yeah, they'll tell you he was wearing a red shirt. The next person will tell you it was black, then blue,
Yeah.
then white.
Yeah. It's
But
interesting.
because of that, because of that flawed system, your memory of events can be molded to be more positive, to be less traumatic. I cannot take away memories, but what I can do is change your perspective. Like I said, that 7-year old who got bit by a dog, in your mind, that dog is some massive primordial killer because you
Right.
were
Mm-hmm.
that big. But upon revisiting that memory, not directly as you, that's age regression and that's a no no,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of witnessing it, you you might see that was a Jack Russell Terrier.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a small dog, but you were just a small person, and
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't as scary as you remember. And perhaps even give that person an opportunity to speak with that person, that younger version of themselves, to explain to them what happened and why they shouldn't carry this memory. And that is enough for your subconscious to alter the way that it views those events, because you're no longer a confused child in your memory. You've now readdressed those subconscious associations and memories as the logical, calm, guided you.
Mm-hmm.
And so now your interpretation can be different.
So you said talk to that younger version, but don't do age regression. That's a big no-no. Why is that a no-no?
Age regression is where you experience your trauma again firsthand.
Ah, okay.
And yes, another example of malleability of memory, which I talk about this a lot because it needs to be spoken of. The last time hypnosis and hypnotherapy was really in the news was the 1980s during
Yes.
the whole satanic panic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of the malleability of memory, that's kind of how we got in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
because we were taking these children who were allegedly victims of abuse, and we were guiding their recollection and their memory to indicate abuse. Not that it had even happened, but because of the memory and perception is such a malleable thing. They were able to guide these children's perception into believing something bad happened. And that kind of dinged hypnosis's reputation a little bit. And that's also why we don't do age regression. That and a bunch of incidences of re-traumatizing people. And
Right.
it's not a never thing. There
Yeah.
are very few times the age regression is appropriate, but the way that it is done now is you witness that thing happening as you removed from it.
I
And depending on how traumatic the memory is how far removed will make the visualization of it. Are you there in the moment witnessing it right next to you, or are you sitting in a movie theater in the back row witnessing this on a screen 50 feet away?
Very
That's the kind of
interesting.
safety we can give
Yeah, very, very interesting. Because, like I said, I think of hypnosis as being something, I want to be rich, I want to lose weight, I want to stop smoking, but it can be a really powerful
you.
tool to help overcome trauma. And I like that you said the approach could be having yourself now kind of
Mhm.
talk to that younger self, not become and relive that younger self, but
But
say, hey,
communicate.
listen, I'm grown now, I'm in control, my future is better, those kinds of things, and rebuilding an identity, because trauma does, I think, shape people's identities. And
100%.
but we have a conscious ability to change our identity. We can change, what, this is who I was yesterday, but today I'm going to be this. And I think through tools like hypnosis, you can do that. Before we end this episode, because this is exciting, you and I think, could talk for hours about this stuff because I find it so fascinating. But one thing I asked you to talk about when we got on the show is hypnosis, I think, is seen as a less common psychological tool, and it's becoming more common, which I think is a really good thing. It's a good way for people to deal with issues of the past, to deal with issues of the present and the future. But one of the things you and I happened upon discussing the last time we talked was tarot cards. And again, I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with this. Growing up, I thought tarot cards were witchcraft. I thought they were, fortune telling, and the Bible tells us we shouldn't tell fortunes, therefore it's wrong and it's of the devil, all that kind of stuff. Um, Recently, I've started to see tarot cards not as, somebody with a crystal ball telling my future, but rather as a psychological tool. So that if somebody asks the question, the tarot card reveals the answer that they already know, rather than, hey, the lover's card is here, you're going to find love and be happily ever after. Maybe you
Yeah.
see it and you know what, I'm missing self-love in my life, and everybody's interpretation of that is different. So talk to me about either tarot cards or other less common psychological tools and how they can be used in our lives.
Well, it's it's how we perceive things.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's see. I actually have my cards right here. We'll do
Oh, let's see.
a little experiment.
Okay.
So let's see. All right.
This is exciting. I didn't expect this. This is exciting.
Got weird cards, but it is the Eight of Cups.
The Eight of
For
Cups.
example, that's moving out and moving on,
Walking
moving forward with
away.
your journey,
Yes.
walking away. It's whatever you think that should mean at the time. And
Yes.
that's the power of tarot. When I say that card and what it means, if I were to pull one of the face cards, like the King of Swords, and describe the aspect of the King of Swords,
Mm-hmm.
the immediate pop in your mind of who that is, that's the importance of that reading. It makes you consider that person. And the major arcana, which is like the fool to the world,
Yeah.
the beginning to completion, that can actually be used to illustrate Carl Jung's psychological archetypal journey
Mm-hmm.
of all people. Because the tarot, it boils down to the major arcana are universal archetypes that everyone cycles through more than once in their life.
Yes.
And the minor is simply experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, what the tarot exists as is this mirror
Mm-hmm.
that when I say the beginning of a journey, when I pull the fool, I don't need to tell you what that journey is because your mind already
No.
relates it.
Yes.
Exactly.
And you pulled, for
So
example, the Eight of Cups. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the tarot, it shows either a person or people walking away from something, but you could pull it and perceive that as somebody walking toward something too. And so if
I
you
think mine
see
was
that,
gas cans.
you kind of know intuitively, you know what, there is something I need to move away from in my life. It could be something major, like a relationship that's unhealthy, or it could be something minor, like, hey, I need to break this smoking habit or whatever it is. But you kind of intuitively, you know. So, and
Exactly.
also for those of the listeners who are not familiar with the Fool's journey in the major arcana, it is almost like the hero's journey that you hear about in
Yeah.
literature. So just as we study literature and we try to identify these patterns in ourselves, tarot is a story. And I don't think
Yes.
many people know that because we've been taught that this is, fortune telling. It's really not. Some people use it that way,
It's
sell it that way, but it's not.
the human experience is very universal because we all live different lives. We're all different people with different thoughts and experiences, but we all go through the same things. We
Yeah.
all experience joy and loss and anger and heartache and motivation and depression. And there's all of these things that we all know,
Yeah.
all of us know. And that is what the tarot exists as, is this universal lens to be able to, much as I would change a perspective in hypnosis, you change perspective with tarot by thinking about new things and having new associations.
Hmm.
One of the best examples is the death card.
Yeah.
Everyone's always afraid to see the death card. It's one of the best things you can pull
It's
because it means
change.
change,
Yes.
transformation.
Yes.
And that that's our association on display.
Yeah.
We see death and we think an end. We don't think rebirth, which is what the card's meaning actually is. Now, if you see death next to the tower, you're hosed. But
Right. I was about to say, I'm not afraid of the death card. It's when that tower card flips that
everyone's afraid of the tower.
I just say, you know what? This was the wrong card. I flipped the wrong one. Let me try again.
I'm putting this back at the deck.
Yeah, I'm putting it back
Yeah.
in the deck, and then I get the death, and then I get the devil, and I'm like, okay, fine.
All right, I get it. Get it. But to me, tarot is kind of working on the same concept as something like therapeutic journaling or
Yes, I agree.
therapy. I have a very close peer, one of the people I work with, that she uses tarot in her sessions.
Interesting.
That she does a 3 or 4 card layout, I believe, and uses that to guide the hypnotic portion of her session. And she says it's
Interesting.
worked great so far because they're such universal archetypes that I could take any card in that deck and relate it to anyone because they're so universal. Every one of those archetypes and experiences people are familiar with.
Yes.
Um,
I can see that being useful in hypnosis. So back to that example of the card you pulled, the Eight of Cups, where they're either walking away or walking towards something. I could see that in a hypnosis session, you could guide somebody and what is it you're walking away from? And then when that filter between the conscious and the subconscious is lifted, suddenly you're clear on which direction you need to be going, whether to or from. And I think it's so powerful. And I think that we need to talk about these things and lift this stigma that just because
Absolutely.
something isn't traditional means that it's less valuable, because in many cases this is more valuable. And we've all seen in our intro to psych classes in high school and college those funny little images. What do you see in the image? It's the same thing. It's just got this stigma on it.
Yeah.
And almost every culture in history has had some version of a visual psychological tool like this. An oracle, we hear about oracles in Eastern civilization. You read about prophets in the Bible. They saw images and burning bushes and all of these things that, whether you believe it to be literal or allegorical, there's all this symbology in all religions.
Yes.
And so even if you're not religious, you can still look at these and see what is the psychological basis. What is my initial reaction to this? What is my subconscious trying to tell me?
Absolutely. And this is there's something to be found in everything.
Mhm.
And this is a weird thing I've been pointing out recently because I just experienced it. Have you ever, this is non sequitur as hell.
Okay. That's
Have
okay.
you
I
ever
talk
seen the
about
movie
priests.
Inside
So,
Out?
no, I haven't.
Okay. It's a Pixar movie, which means
Okay.
it's a kids movie.
Oh, I
The most
have. It's
in
the four emotions.
Yes,
Yes, yes, I have.
that is the most amazing explanation of mental health I've ever seen. It was
Okay.
it was actually written with the help of mental health professionals. They
Interesting.
actually use it in the mental health field.
Hmm.
Um, so many people never realize that before I say it, but rewatch that movie and view it through the lens of this is legitimately trying to help children with mental issues. And
I
like, because what's
will.
the
I
movie
will.
about?
I
It's
will.
about why you need to be sad, why you don't need to get rid of your sadness. It's about dealing with your emotions. And even the part, and this is the part that blew my mind entirely,
Yeah.
is the part where they enter into the subconscious. The in those two idiot guards guarding the gates of the subconscious. Uh the banter that they have back and forth could be used as a hypnotic induction. It's a confusion
Interesting.
induction. The whole my hat thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says my hat, but that's my hat. But you had my hat, but I gave you my hat, and it says my hat in it. You can use that as a confusion induction. And so
Interesting.
this critical filter that we speak of isn't very smart. So all you have to do is confuse it, and it leaves the gates unbarred. And to
Ah.
further illustrate that, if you remember in the movie, when they're wandering through the subconscious, they see a vacuum cleaner and it chases them, and it's huge because they're afraid of vacuum cleaners.
Uh-huh.
Because in that memory in that girl's memory, the vacuum cleaner was giant because she remembered it as a small child. And I that illustrated everything I've told my clients about with fear and trauma,
Hmm.
that vacuum cleaner wasn't really 50 times bigger than you. You were just a small child, but this memory of it in your subconscious remains 50 feet tall
Hmm.
until you readdress it.
Until you change the scale and you
Uh-huh.
realize you are now bigger than the vacuum cleaner or the
Yeah.
problem or that one traumatic event. You are bigger than that. Wow, I'm
Yes.
going to rewatch that movie with my kids because one of the things
Yeah.
I'm hoping, not only from this podcast, but in my own life, is that people become more comfortable talking about issues like
Yes.
this. That it's not something that they just talk about with only their close friends or only their doctors or therapists or hypnotherapists. I want this to be, a brunch conversation that people have with each other, because I think until we lift the stigma that the truth is everybody has some trauma in their life. Nobody
Yeah.
grew up in a bubble.
No one.
Everybody has something that they're dealing with, and mental illness is prevalent. We know how prevalent depression is. If you look at the pandemic and the rate of suicide and mental illness over the
Yeah.
last 2 years, it's horrifying.
Yes.
It's almost become another epidemic all its own, this
Yeah.
mental
And
illness,
it's because of that stigma.
the
I
stigma.
I have a small handful of male clients.
Hmm.
Most of who else I see is women
Yeah,
because in this country there is a huge stigma, especially with men, against talking about your problems.
right.
And I had that problem. For
Hmm.
most of my life, I was the guy that was like, I'm not crazy. I don't need therapy. I don't need to talk about anything. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah,
And I viewed it as weakness.
right.
The concept of seeking help as weakness. And
Mhm.
now looking back, I see the irony in that because it was the refusal of help that kept me weak, and that I was not truly strong until I realized I needed and accepted help.
Right.
And that's what made me strong. That
Because
all this time I've been thinking the wrong thing.
the easy way out, the weak
Yeah,
way out, is to not talk about it. It is
exactly.
harder to talk about something that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you feel vulnerable. That is harder. And so, in
Yeah.
fact, and I want anybody who's listening to this right now to hear the message that being in a place of vulnerability takes a heck of a lot more strength than it does to pretend that nothing's wrong. And
Yeah.
when you give voice to that vulnerability, when you say, I need to recover from trauma, I need help overcoming this addiction, I really need to take some time for my mental health because working indoors all day is making me depressed. Whatever that is, I think that is where you find your strength, and that is where you can help other people and
Yes.
give people permission to talk about it as well. And I've talked about it a little bit on previous episodes. I'm going to be talking about it more in future episodes. I have struggled with depression my entire life.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where for years, people would say, how can you be depressed? You
Yeah.
have a great marriage, a great house, healthy
You
kids,
have all of these things.
a fantastic career. Just shake it off. You're going to be fine. And I'm thinking, but I don't want to wake up in the morning. It takes all of
Yeah.
my energy to get into the shower. Something is
Yes.
wrong.
Yes.
And no, you'll be fine. Shake it off. You've got it better than most people. And
You
that's
don't
our
understand why
approach.
you're not okay. I would be okay in your circumstances. And
Yes.
like,
And then you feel guilty. It
yeah,
makes you worse because you're thinking, I should be happy. I can
yeah,
objectively see
there's
all of
something
this.
wrong with me because I should be happy. Everyone
Yes.
says I should be happy when the healthy thing to do would be to simply ask that person, what's wrong? What can we do to help?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and it's just a matter of caring about the person next to you. And there's that is a massive I that's actually the one problem I could name in society today is we don't give a crap about the person next to us.
We don't.
And it's a tragic thing because like I said, we all have the same experiences.
We
We're
do.
all the same people. We
Mhm.
might believe different things, we might have had our experiences in different orders, but we're all the exact same thing.
We're more
And
alike than we are different. And if
and
we
that's
can
really
see
what
that,
that's shown me because
yes.
I have an international client base
Hmm.
and I work with people from all over the world, which means my schedule is utterly weird.
Yeah.
But I see these people who are culturally totally different than me, grew up with completely different experiences, learned different things from essentially an alien world.
Yeah.
But I talk to them about their problems and the root of them and what's happening and how to fix them. They're no different.
Yeah.
They're absolutely no
And
different.
their fears and their
Yeah.
wants. And, it's all this, like I said, we all do have the shared experience of consciousness. We can't define it, but we all have it. We all
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Well, tell me, if somebody wants to begin working with a hypnotherapist, where do they begin and what can they expect?
Well, first you have to find one.
Yes.
And that's
Well, I know of
always,
one right here.
yeah, we know of one. And I'll say how to get a hold of me at the end of the podcast. I encourage anyone that wishes to work with me to reach out. I work remote, so it doesn't matter where you are. Um, there are some warnings I need to give.
Okay.
Um, hypnotherapy is an unregulated profession.
Okay.
In such, you will encounter people calling themselves a hypnotherapist that have taken a 6-hour Udemy course and now they call themselves a hypnotherapist.
Good to know.
On the other end of the spectrum, you have people like myself who have attended a 720-hour college program and have received certification from a hypnotherapist union or a legitimate certifying body.
Mhm.
And that all boils down to talk to the person. If you don't want to work with me or I'm not available, for one, if I'm not available, I can refer you to many, many, many hypnotherapists. That's pretty much all I know.
Mhm.
So if you would rather work with a woman, I have plenty of female peers. If you would rather work with whatever, I've probably got something. So that's the easiest way.
Yeah.
Um, but talk to them. Absolutely talk to them. I offer a 15-minute consultation to anyone that wants to learn, that wants to know how this will help them. There's no charge. We just let you fill out a contact form on my website. I'll touch base with you, schedule a time. We'll just have 15, 20-minute talk. I'll
Okay.
tell you what this is, what we could do for you, what it costs, all of those things. We go over that, and then we start the process of filling out paperwork, taking suggestibility tests, and once you're done with that, we sit down for a session.
Okay.
And how a session goes really varies by hypnotherapist to hypnotherapist. Um, Speaking for myself, my sessions are generally 50 minutes long. I have started offering other options for longer sessions for clients that would like more time once I realized that this was something that people wanted. But standard sessions, 50 minutes, and it's kind of what it sounds like. It's hypnotherapy. It's half and half.
Mhm.
So for the first half, it's we're just talking. I'm asking you questions. I'm asking how that makes you feel. I'm asking you to elaborate on things. But where the difference comes in between, say, me and talk therapy is I am writing down your verbiage, your metaphors, the adjectives that you use to describe your problem, because that is the language of your subconscious that it will most readily accept suggestion by.
Mhm.
And after we speak for about 20, 30 minutes or so, we just talk, tell you to relax, and we have a conversation. From the outside, hypnotherapy is the most unusual thing you'll see because it might just look like me telling you stories.
Yeah.
Uh, but there is reason for every word that I say. There's reason for every change of course, every redoubling of effort, everything. And it's all being noted. So the next time you come back, after the first session, I will have studied your case and the information I've gathered and create for you a completely customized journey and experience. And we'll work with what we need to work on. And as I said, you will start seeing results quickly,
Good.
quickly. You will notice a change in your mindset the next day. It's the strangest thing. It blew
Wow.
my mind.
Wow. All right. So before we wrap up, what questions am I not asking about hypnosis that I should be asking? Is there anything else you want, big idea that our listeners should leave this episode with?
The big idea that I like people to live with is kind of the first point I touched on, and it bears reinforcing. And that's that hypnosis and hypnotherapy is not magic, it's not metaphysical, it's not anything like that. It is scientific, it is accepted. There is hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of legitimate medical research
Mm-hmm.
to reinforce everything that I've said. So that hypnosis is normal, it's natural. It is a function of your mind that you can use to change the parts of you you're not happy with. There's no reason to suffer with a fear or a trauma or anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting statistics I like to point out is, according to the NIH, 20% of people will suffer with a fear or a phobia. 8.7% of people have a crippling fear. And of that, those people, only 6% will ever seek treatment.
Wow.
And
So
there's
that's
no reason for that.
millions of people that are suffering with some kind of a crippling fear or,
Mhm.
phobia, something, millions of people
Because
around the
what do
world.
you do if you have a fear? Where do you go?
Mhm.
Because if your tooth aches, you go to the dentist. If you get sick, you go to the doctor. If you're afraid of clowns, where do you go? Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and the answer to that is a hypnotherapist.
Right. And I love that you said that because this is something I was recently talking to somebody about in terms of depression. My 7-year-old son recently had a toothache. So I'm glad that you said that. And I was saying, when he had a toothache, we took him to the dentist. If you have a mental ache, you need to go to somebody who can help you. It's no
Hmm?
different.
Yes.
And so I love that. And I think that, there's certainly instances where a psychiatrist or,
Yes.
a mental health practitioner is necessary, but there are other cases where hypnosis can truly help you with those or
Yes.
be an addition to the
That's what
treatment
I was about to
that
say.
you're getting. Yeah, I
I
think it
work
can be
on
an
a lot
addition.
of referral from mental health professionals and health professionals as an adjunct to care.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not nowhere should I say if you have clinical PTSD, you should just go see a hypnotherapist.
Right.
Continue seeing your mental health professional. Continue going to your support groups. But maybe consider adding this as an adjunct to your treatment because there is real progress to be made.
Right.
And I guarantee you, if you are that person, your psychotherapist or your healthcare professional will be thrilled to hear that you're pursuing hypnotherapy because they know that you're going to see results.
Most of the people
So,
who I know personally who have gone to see hypnotherapists have been referred by their mental health
mhm,
practitioners. They
yes.
go to therapy and they're talking through things and they say, you're stuck on X, or
And
you need to
until
address
we
differently.
need to continue until we can do this, we can't continue our work. So I need to get you to deal with this so we can keep working. I
Yes.
work with a couple of psychotherapists that we we have that exchange because
Yeah.
we're working with different things. They're
Mhm.
working with the conscious mind. I'm working with the subconscious mind. And together we work with that person's whole mind.
Right. I have one friend who was seeing a therapist because she was going through a divorce, and it was really, really tough for her. And she was working through the anxiety and things like that. The therapist told her, "You're not sleeping. You can't stop thinking about this. This is interfering with your daily life. I want you to go to a hypnotherapist who will teach you every time this enters into your
Hmm?
mind to switch it with,
Yep.
switch X with Y." And
Yep.
she said after her first session, she felt some relief. And this was relief that medication and traditional therapy wasn't providing, because it reprogrammed her brain. When this trigger comes up, you do this instead.
Yes.
And then within a month or so, really, she was able to sleep again. She was able to go to work and focus on her job and do the things she wanted.
Reinforcing those anchors.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. So
Yep.
I believe that hypnotherapy is powerful. I believe that you should work with somebody who knows what they're doing. For the listeners out there, you guys can tell from listening to J. Robert Parker that he knows what he's talking about. He's done his research. Not only is he certified, but I can feel your passion about this topic. I can tell that it wasn't a one and done. I've got my certificates. Now I'm just going to start practicing. I can tell that you read and you learn constantly, and that, I believe in just speaking with you these last few times that you are truly engaged in the individual, and where is their
Yes.
consciousness and what can I do to help them improve regardless of where their situation may have been before. What can we do to help them move forward now? And I think that, anybody who wants to work with a hypnotherapist, you have to feel comfortable with them. You have to feel safe with them. You have to feel like you can be authentic with them and tell them, you know what, this is the problem. This is what I have going on. This is where it started. And I think that you provide that. And like you said, it may to an outsider just look like a conversation. And what a great place to be with somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you can talk to, that you can be your real self with, who can then say, okay, let's remove the filters here. Let's figure out where you are and let me get you to a better place.
Mhm.
And I think that that's incredible. And I think the service that you provide to people is incredible. So thank you so much for being on the show today. I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it very
much.
much. I definitely do want to have you back, because as we were talking through this,
Absolutely.
I thought of so many other rabbit holes that we could go down.
Oh, absolutely. There's
And
there's so many.
I had to stop myself from asking because we would never finish the episode. But I appreciate you so much being on the show. How can the listeners get in touch with you?
Easiest way to get a hold of me is through my website. Again, my name's J. Robert Parker. My company is Twin Ravens Hypnotherapy and Research LLC. Excuse me. Our website is www.twinravens.org. That has information about my services on it, ways to get in contact with me, examples of my past interviews, things like that. Fill out our contact form. Let me know what you want. Are you interested in a session? Do you want a consultation? Would you like to see my research papers? I keep a huge stack of accumulated research that I love to give people so they see. Um, Other than that, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Each of those things is Twin Ravens Hypno, and that's the easiest way. You could call me, but that's a That's a roll of the dice. That's why I tell people just to get a hold of me through my website.
Yeah, I've learned airplane mode's a good place to be. So
Well, like I tell people, the phone is no longer a valid method of communication. Everyone that tries to call me is just a robot trying to steal my credit card information. So can you
same.
not?
Same. And I want to be able to filter through all of the
Uh-huh.
information coming in and only consume what I want. So if I'm getting
Exactly.
scam likely calls all the time, I'm not even answering. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks so much for providing
Thanks
the
for having me
listeners
on.
not only information about what hypnotherapy is, but also the history of it and some great conversation about, overcoming the psychological barriers that stop us from being the best version of ourselves. So I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.